Since we're never recording now, we completed the pledge of allegiance. We have done roll, and we're only missing one person. So we have next on the agenda, swearing in.
Swearing in of Jason Stein. I, Jason Stein, a Plan Commission appointee of the Town Council President,
A Plan Commission appointee of the Town Council President,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully
that I will faithfully
perform the duties of my appointed office
perform the duties of my appointed office
and will support
and will support
and honor to the best
and honor to the best
of my ability
of my ability
all applicable laws of the state of Indiana
all applicable laws of the state of Indiana
and the town of Fortville,
and the town of Fortville,
as well as the governing rules,
as well as the governing rules,
policies,
policies,
and procedures of the commission.
and procedures of the commission.
I hereby affirm that I will perform
I hereby affirm that I will perform
the duties of this public trust
the duties of this public trust
in a fair,
in a fair,
equitable,
equitable,
and ethical manner
and ethical manner
according to the law.
according to the law.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Jason. Welcome to the commission.
Thank you.
Happy to have you here. First item on the agenda is consider approval of minutes for the May 31, 22 meeting. Look for motion for a discussion or change.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor of approval of minutes of 5/31/22, indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstained? Motion passes. Item 3, a public hearing for case number 02-RZ-2022, the Ridgeview West PUD ordinance number 2022-6D.
Good evening, I'm Adam Zaklikowski, the Planning and Building Director for the town. So before you tonight, this is a request by Kent Ritter of Hudson Investing LLC for the commission to hold a public hearing and to issue a positive recommendation to the town council for a rezone from residential 3.5 to planned unit development with associated development standards for 2 multi-family residential buildings on approximately 4 acres. And the project is planned at approximately 600 North Main Street. More specifically on the housing that the applicant's looking to construct, looking to do 2 3-story buildings, each with 2-story portions at the north and south ends. And each would be about 47,200 square feet in size, and each with 40 units. So we have 80 units in the project in total. I also want to mention that the current owners of the property are Bob and Linda Spinner. So this is presumably under contract. So here's an aerial of the project. You can see to the east is the existing Ridgeview apartments that were also purchased by affiliate LLC, formed by Mr. Ritter. Those apartments were built, I want to say, in the late 90s, early 2000s. This particular piece of property, it's at the north end where Main Street dead ends, and Main Street also aligns to the north in the Timber Ridge neighborhood. And so the property has been open space, undeveloped for a number of years. And over to the west is Mr. Spinner's home. They would continue to own that home. And so there's 2 parcels that we're talking about, but they would purchase 1 plus a half of the second parcel, and the remainder would still be zoned residential 3.5 that we'll call the homestead property, Mr. Spinner. Here's just a bird's eye image of the property. In case we need to refer to this, we can. And then if we take a look at the zoning map, everything that you see in the beige color is residential 3.5. And so just as a refresher, that zoning district is primarily intended for single-family residential It's widespread throughout the town, although you can do duplex units in that district as well, but nothing of more intensity than a duplex. The Ridgeview Apartments, the existing facility, is a grandfathered zoning district. It's R-4. It dates back to the Hancock County zoning ordinance from 2002. That's a higher density designation that we carry over and recognize today. If we take a look at the comprehensive plan map, now first I think it's important just so that the public understands the difference between the comprehensive plan and the zoning property. So the zoning, basically, you have rights to develop the property under the current zoning district. The comprehensive plan really comes into play when rezonings are being contemplated. What will the community become? In this case, the town's most recent comprehensive plan map was done in 2014. This area is shown as residential. The map at that time did not make any distinction between multifamily or single family. It just says residential. If we take a look at the concept elevations, again, we can always refer back to this. You can see that there's a fairly high degree of articulation. You can see that the north and south end of each building is only 2 stories, as opposed to the center portion, which is 3. The reason for doing that is, at least from a staff perspective and early informal meetings with the applicant, we felt that since there's predominantly single-family residential homes nearby, that there should be some sensitivity to height, and then if it was a pure 3-story building on both sides, that it might overwhelm that area. So at least to that aspect, we might respond to that. And the type of architecture and materials, we'll go into a little bit more detail, is something similar that we would see anywhere in the project in suburban Minneapolis. For the concept layout, again, we can go into some more detail, but basically the town, or the staff, would like to extend Main Street and connect those 2 portions, and it would still be a public street. And the main reason for doing that is to provide connectivity between the Timber Ridge, the western part of the Timber Ridge neighborhood, the downtown area. The fact that those roads have been aligned for a number of years kind of leads us to believe that, at least at a certain point in time, there was an understanding that could be extended. And then also for emergency response, certainly the more access points that first responders have to different parts of the community, that's always advantageous. So for this particular project, rather than doing a kind of a more suburban layout that frankly we have to the east that was done in the 90s, this is somewhat of a more urban layout in that these buildings would both front onto an extended Main Street. For any PUD, if you'll recall, any PUD in the town generally follows the PUD standards template. So that was adopted by town council by ordinance back in 2017. And those standards were written for single-family residential projects. And most of the standards are not applicable really for multifamily projects like this or commercial PUD. So we did advise that they take a look at the Madison Village PUD, which is a multifamily PUD that was done recently. So it's certainly based on that template loosely, but it had to be modified based on the type of use. And of course, lastly, if you'll recall, any deviation even from the template is acceptable as long as the context is. The other thing that I want to point out is the main reason for going to land unit development zoning as opposed to a straight zoning district like multifamily is because it does allows for first floor commercial, but it also allows for unique development standards that are applicable just to this property, as is the case with any PUD. So that's one of the advantages of doing a planned unit development is you can craft unique and from the town's perspective, high development standards that would apply to the project. That may be frankly difficult to pass on a town-wide basis. So what I've done here is, similarly to other PUDs, is we've analyzed the various development topics, what they're actually proposing as part of this zoning package, and then what the standard town requirements would be if they were to basically be straight zoning, and try to at least compare that so you have an idea in your head. So, for example, on the use category, residential uses, any residential use that would be allowed in the multifamily zoning district would be allowed in this zoning district naturally. Also, commercial uses would be permitted on the first floor only if they so choose. They're not required to do that, but if they so choose, anything that would be allowed in the commercial neighborhood zoning district. In terms of the height of the building, they're proposing a 50-foot maximum or 3 stories, and multifamily zoning would be a maximum of 45 feet. So slight but reasonable deviation there. In terms of density, frankly, it is a bit of a departure from the typical zoning density that's allowed, but what they're proposing is not uncharacteristic for other similar development projects in the metro area. So for example, they'd have a maximum of 80 units, 40 in each building, spread out over 4 acres. So they can get up to 20 dwelling units per acre. And the minimum dwelling unit size in this case would be 700 square feet to meet the market demands. This would be all market rate housing. I wanted to mention that as well. Whereas if they went to multifamily zoning, minimum dwelling unit size has to average out to 1,000 square feet. And then based on 80 units and the minimum lot area that would be needed for the various sizes, whether it's a 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, or 3-bedroom, they basically have to have 9 acres under the current zoning, or under the multifamily zoning in order to achieve this density. So there's also a breakdown there. The majority of the units would be 2-bedroom, 2-bath, but then on each end of the spectrum, there would be some 1-bedroom, 1-bath, and then 3 bedrooms, 2-bath. In terms of the setbacks, they're looking to do 0 feet minimum, 15 feet max along Main Street. Again, trying to create that urban feel. Under multifamily zoning, they'd have to have a 40-yard front setback. However, on the rear yard and the side yard, they're both having a minimum of 50 feet, and it exceeds it in both cases. And that does match what the typical straight zoning is for multifamily. In terms of maximum lot coverage, none is prescribed. They would have to follow the zoning ordinance, and per residential multifamily, that maximum lot coverage is 75%. So the other thing that I wanted to mention to be clear on is that the way this PUD and other PUDs works is that what they've documented are basically the unique development standards for this project. But anything that the PUD is silent on, it's written in here that we would revert to the multifamily zoning district or commercial neighborhood as it relates to uses. So things like lot coverage. There are a few other things that I'll get into that the developer feels comfortable just going with the normal zoning requirements. For parking, they're looking to provide 1.5 spaces per dwelling unit. And that would amount to 120 spaces. And if there's a commercial tenant on the first floor, which frankly they're not planning on doing at this point, but if that were to happen, they follow the commercial zoning requirements for parking. From a staff perspective, we wanted to make sure that the amount of parking was right sized for the development, that there wasn't too little and that there wasn't too much. So since 120 was what the calculations would turn out to be, the proposal that you saw, you see in concept, I think had maybe 146 spots, so it was Overpark. So they had agreed to cap it at 130 spaces with language saying that the planning director may allow additional spaces if necessary. So this way, if there happens to be a cafe, something like that, there's room for that. Lastly, in the residential multifamily zoning district, the zoning ordinance would call for 2 spaces per dwelling unit. If you recall the discussion from the Madison Village PUD multifamily project, their experience was that doing a variety of projects that was overparked. They felt comfortable with 1.5 spaces per dwelling unit, and the board and council felt the same. So, which again, logically, that does seem to make sense based on there are a number of 1-bedrooms in this complex. So, not exactly everybody would have 2 parks. For lighting, their standard is higher than the typical town standard. All exterior lights are to be fully shielded and point downward. The zoning ordinance technically does allow some semi-cut-off fixtures, which isn't quite as restrictive, but certainly standard development practice lately has been to have those lights fully capped, shielded, pointed downward, so it's not intrusive to the residents. And then in terms of the building design, of course, you saw the concept up there. They are looking to do a first floor amenity center along Main Street, and that would have to have the appearance of a commercial storefront. Very similar to what they're showing in the concept plan. It could be something like a workout center for the residents. In terms of materials, they would be allowed to do brick, limestone, or a product appearing to be limestone, stone coping, cement panels, hardy plank and panel, and vinyl siding would be prohibited. And all windows would have a minimum 1x4 nominal trim when surrounded by siding. It's pretty typical of your developments. And most importantly, the overall appearance will need to be in substantial conformance to those color elevations that you've seen there. In terms of the town requirements for multifamily, honestly, there are none clearly stated for design standards on multifamily in the ordinance. I'm sure you could make a case that different provisions may apply, but what we have on the books is all geared towards single family development. For signage, they don't have anything, any huge proposal on that. They'd like to do 2 smaller signs. Actually, probably just 1, but they'll have the opportunity to do 2 if they so chose. 1 on the north end, 1 on the south end. 40 square feet. The code would limit that at 32 square feet, so not a big departure. Landscaping, buffer yard, and open space, that would all be per the zoning ordinance. There are no unique standards for this development. So in terms of the landscaping, if you recall, there's a variety of different standards on parking lot landscaping, building foundation landscaping. It's actually pretty robust. For the buffer yard, since they're following the zoning ordinance, they have to do what's called a type 1 buffer yard, which simply means that in addition to that setback, that 50-foot setback, they have to have an additional 10 feet. And within that, they have to put some trees and let's see, they'd have to have 1 deciduous and 1 evergreen tree per 50 feet of boundary, and the evergreen trees would have to be a minimum of 5 feet tall. And so they built that into their concept plan accordingly. And then lastly, on the open space analysis, there is a small picnic area they're showing south of that west building that would be for the residents. The zoning ordinance, if they did straight zoning, would require a minimum of 8% land area for all open space. That would include the retention pond, which they're showing as well. So they're exceeding that number. If you recall, for any rezone, whether it's a PUD or going to straight zoning, there's 5 different criteria that the state law requires you to look at, to consider. It's not binding, but these are different items that you have to consider in your recommendation. recommendation. So the first one is, would this rezone be consistent with the comprehensive plan? My professional advice would be yes, that it is, that the town of Fortville future growth concept map identifies this area as residential. The comprehensive plan text emphasizes the importance of having a wide variety of housing choices, i.e. single family, multifamily. Frankly, in terms of a brand new market rate apartment project, this is the only one that's underway right now in the town. We have not seen anything been constructed in frankly decades in the town, with the exception to a degree of the Madison Village under construction now, but that is income restricted. Second one is, if they were to rezone it, would it be consistent with the current conditions and character of current structures? I'd say yes, if you're looking at the area nearby, it exceeds the development standards of the Ridgeview apartments to the east. Number three, is it consistent with the desirable use of land? I'd say yes. It will connect Main Street, allowing for easier access between north and south areas. It'd be beneficial for emergency response. And given the size of the property of 4 acres, this multifamily use is logical. Fourthly, is it consistent with the conservation of property values? I'd suggest that stringent development standards requiring a high quality development within a planned unit development will ensure property values on nearby properties are maintained. And then lastly, is it consistent with responsible growth and development? I'd say yes, that allowing high quality multifamily infill development, potentially mixed use, in a walkable environment meets this objective. In terms of remonstrance or comments, the town council members didn't have any negative comments during first reading. At the time I put this together, we had not received any letters of remonstrance, although today we did. I had forwarded that on to all of you and to the council. Property owners to the north were concerned, and they're here in the audience tonight, so I'm sure they can speak more about their concerns, but it had to do with density, working, land use, so things of that nature. With that, my recommendation would be to provide a positive recommendation to the Fortville Town Council. And then the next steps, which are always tentative, they are subject to change, would be that the Fortville Town Council would review this regardless of your recommendation, whether it's positive, negative, or no recommendation, for second reading of the ordinance on July 5th at 7 p.m. here at this building. And then if they were to approve it, then there would be a separate construction plan review, which would come in, including drainage review, building plan review, and permitting, and all those would be done by staff, obviously in conformance with what was done here. There's a possibility that maybe the site plan may have to come back to the planning commission, and it depends on, as you know, for multifamily commercial, that all comes to the planning commission. We'll have to figure out whether or not it would be necessary in this case, because there is a fair amount of detail that's already shown in this concept plan, so haven't really decided on that. But with that, if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to address those. And the applicant is here as well. One last thing that I want to point out is this was the retention area, the pond on the west side of the property. It might look like a berm, but it is would be a pond. With that, if you have any questions, address them. Thank you.
Anybody have questions for Adam?
Do we know at this point, at this stage, how many of the lower level would have commercial spaces? Or do we even know that yet?
We don't know. I would defer to the developer on that, unless something's changed. My understanding is that they're not opposed to doing some limited commercial, but I think they're really geared towards just doing a multi-family project with amenities like a workout room on the first floor.
This may be a question for the developer, but I'll ask it if maybe you've already gone into this. You said that the minimum dwelling area is a significant deviation from the huge standard, but it says the minimum average is 1,000. We're showing a minimum of 700. Have we looked at what is the average dwelling space for? I mean, are we hitting that number? Because obviously the minimum is well below, but if the average hits that number,
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm glad you caught that. I don't know what
Okay.
as the developer, because I didn't have the square footages of
Right.
each of those. They hoping they have that.
You don't have to go back to the drawing, but is that an actual pond or is it a dry pond?
Actual pond.
It's an actual pond. It have to be green this time.
Yeah, I think it may use a lot of colors.
Okay. Just so everyone in the meeting tonight is aware, this is not the end all. Our recommendation is to the council. They make the final decision. This is our recommendation, so this is not the final decision-making body. The process for this will be is I'm going to ask the petitioner to come up and make their statements, answer any questions. And then I'm going to open up for public to make comments. We've got a lot of people in attendance tonight, so I may limit you to a few minutes per comment. So just be respectful of other people that might want to make comments. And that will include the opportunity for remonstrance, for or against. I'll start with for, then we'll go for remonstrance. And then I'll open it up for public officials and then this board to make other comments. So when you come up, I ask you to come to the microphone, state your name and your address, and then your comments, okay? Is the petitioner here coming from representing the developer?
Hi, everyone. How you doing? My name is Kent Ritter. I represent the ownership group of the current Ridgeview apartments and the petitioner for the proposal here. I think my whole presentation. So I wanted to just start off by just talking about a little bit about what we're doing with the current Ridgeview apartments that exist there. Because really we're looking at this as an extension of expansion of that current property. So I thought it was good to give some context to start with, and then we'll talk a little bit about the proposed project. Really kind of the idea of what it's around. So a little bit about me. So I have a company called Hudson Investment based in Indianapolis, born and raised in Indianapolis, and we have really our purpose is to provide attainable workforce housing to folks within the Midwest, and that's what we do. So typically we buy properties and we renovate them, we fix them up, which is exactly what is going on right now at Ridgeview. And with this unique opportunity, we just saw really through our own experience of owning Ridgeview and the weakness that we have and the inbound requests we have for housing, just an intense need for multi-family housing in the area. 48-unit property that have 30 to 40 people on a wait list right now. And so really just saw this as an opportunity to again, kind of live our mission and provide that, attainable, good quality housing for folks in the area. And so that's really kind of the basis of it. And that's really what we do and focus on as a company. Slide. So we purchased Ridgeview in November. I think it was actually October of 2021. But and in doing that, our intention is to come in and spend about $525,000 on improvements, and we're well underway. We renovated about 20% of the units. Honestly, the turnover rate has been way lower than we anticipated. People like it there, and they're not moving, which is fine with us. But it's difficult to turn over their apartment when they're still in it. So we turn over apartments as people move out and people move in. But we've renovated about 8 or so of them. Let me give some pictures. In addition to, well, so that was the old interior. And if you go to the next one, this is what the new interiors look like. So we're really giving them a nice facelift, a nice quality LVT with plank flooring, new cabinets, new countertops, stainless steel appliances, new lighting, new paint. Really, they look and feel brand new. And we've got great feedback from the residents, and they're excited about them. And yeah, we're really happy with the process. Just if you go back from out on the exterior, then on the exterior, so the plan is to renovate all the interiors of the units, and we'll make it through over time as people turn over. We've replaced the signage so that the bottom right, or excuse me, bottom left is the new sign we put in place. Kind of spruce things up there. We've landscaped a lot of the property, trimming trees, and just really opening up the property, creating light inside the units. We're about to seal and stripe and fix the potholes in the entire parking lot, make the parking lot really look and feel brand new. Staining all the decks, stairs. We're adding a gazebo, kind of a sitting area with grilling stations in the middle of the property where that grass is right there. That's going in currently. A lot of these projects had to wait for the weather. So really just a nice community gathering space for the residents and something where they can safely grill out and gather and have picnic tables and just have a nice place to hang out on property. And yeah, so we've really been focused on trying to add a sense of community, add some amenities that they can take advantage of, but really primarily focusing on renovating those interiors and really just bringing that to a really high quality level. So making a significant investment in the property, and as part of this phase 2 development, part of what we've discussed is actually also rewrapping Ridgeview, knowing that it doesn't meet the current building standards of Fortville, actually being able to replace the vinyl siding with like a fiber cement siding, like a hardy board, like something you'd see on just newer construction, just a higher quality material, and what meets the current building standards for the town. So as part of that, I think if you look at the renovation, where we're renovating all the interiors and rewrapping the exteriors, you really end up with what essentially is going to feel like a brand new property, and really be in line with the new expansion as well. So they would tie it together, not exactly the same, but tie it together to feel like one property. And that's really, I think, one of the benefits with a 48-unit property. It's just a difficult thing to manage in that you can't have management on site, and so there's no management. And so in building this extension, the plan would be to run the properties as if they were one. At 130 units, 128 units, we can have the scale to have a management office on site, have actual management staff on site, which, I think it is from, if I lived around the apartment, I think it'd be nice to know that management is on site. It also allows us to add amenities for the folks, like Adam mentioned. Still TBD, but something on the lines of a kind of a community area, a fitness center, something that could benefit the residents and really attract some high quality folks into the apartment. Yeah, so I think that's good. I just wanted to kind of introduce myself and give you a chance, and then I'm going to turn it over to Russell actually to go through a little bit more about phase 2. So thank you all.
Could I ask him a question?
Not yet, man. Just save them for the public comment time, and then you'll be able to ask questions.
Okay.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Russell Brown. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Clark Quinn. Business address is 320 North Reagan Street, Hudson, 1100. So working with the development team. Also with us tonight, we have the architecture team, and then Rusty Moore, who's serving as kind of a project lead on this. So I have a variety of folks here to answer any questions that the commission might have, or the residents might have. I'll start with questions that did come up. Average size of the units is approximately 933 square feet. So not to the 1,000, but the average is almost. And one point to raise, that detention on the western boundaries is dry detention. It is not wet, so it's dry detention. So we didn't run out of wood. Couple points I just wanted to walk through as it relates to things, and I'll say that I'm glad Adam's not in every community because he takes away a lot of the things I talk about, so I don't have to fill as much time for my work. But Adam does a great job of walking through the staff report. I just want to highlight a couple of items. As we look at these elevations, so the front elevation there would be what was visible from Main Street, and the anticipation is that you would this would be building on west side, and then you would have kind of a mirror image on the east side. So you have very similar elevations, but the reason that you have the lower elevations in the north and the south end is that those elevations are very similar to the maximum height in R3 district. So the goal was to maximize, or to mirror up with what would be allowed on the property. Those heights are about 36 feet, I believe. A maximum height in an R3 district is 35 feet. So the goal there was to have a very similar maximum height to what is surrounding in the surrounding districts. And also, those are at least 50 feet away from the property. In the R3 district, you can have a 10-foot side yard, which is what this would be. So you can have a very tall structure and a 10-foot side yard adjacent to R3 zone property. So there is design consideration. There is thought about how that was laid out. I want to make sure that we pointed that out. And that revised site plan that was shown also, to Adam's point, does have excess parking on it. And so as we go through and start to determine where maybe some additional green space would be helpful for the project, for some concerns that may come forward, I think there could be opportunity to turn some of those parking spaces into green space or to impervious to pervious surface. So I think that something just to keep in mind as we go through that process. And Adam also did a great job on the walking through supposed to guide your consideration this evening. 5 factors. And I wanted to add a couple of things to those points. Now, when we talk about consistent with the comp plan and the variety of housing types, one of the goals is to have not only multifamily as well as large unit multifamily, single family homes that are rented, as well as single family ownership. You would have a variety of sizes of multifamily. Kim mentioned that they have 48 units next door. They're all the same floor plan. They're all 2-bedroom, 1 bath. So there is no variety in the existing Ridgeview. So in this, we would add opportunities for 1 bedroom, 1 bath, all the way up to 3 bedroom, 2 bath. So something that we think is important. It's not just variety of types in that do you own it or do you rent it, but also in square footage opportunities for households of different sizes. Talk about consistent with the current conditions or character of the current structures. With all honesty, I think that building multifamily next to existing multifamily is, from my perspective, the definition of consistency from those surrounding current structures. There are, as Adam mentioned, it's consistent with the most desirable use of the land. There are no a review of your zoning map. I don't know if there's any vacant, currently available multifamily zone property that's ready to go, ready for dirt to be turned today. So the goal of having development opportunities within your corporate limits, they're not significant. We think this is an appropriate place to have that here in your community. Is it consistent with the conservation of property values? As mentioned in the staff report, the design considerations related to height, the limitations on curb cuts on the new expansion of the street, extension of the street, having only 2 curb cuts for each new building, we think does do that, does conserve property values, does conserve ease of access through the property for those who live south. One thing we did not talk about when we were here at town council last week, it was suggested to us that there might be some traffic calming measures that could be built into the design of the road, whether that was a bump out, whether that was some other crosswalks, other mechanisms to avoid this becoming a traffic strip between these 2 buildings. And so I think those are not shown on the site plan. There will be further discussion as we go through review and consideration of the site plan. And finally, is this consistent with responsible growth and development? I certainly believe it is. Infill development like this is really an infill development project. In a smaller community, you don't have a lot of infill projects. Larger communities, you do have infill, lots of infill opportunities. But infill development decreases the constraint requirement for new public infrastructure. And we think that is important to consider here. You're not straining what already exists, but you're also adding new public infrastructure that, quite frankly, single family development here probably doesn't support the extension of Main Street by itself. It's not an expensive extension through the property. If you have a single family development that may not allow for some longer to come in and make those extensions. So we think those are important factors to consider in addition to those already. Otherwise, again, I think staff report does a fantastic job of walking us through many of the components of the PUD. We're happy to answer questions if the commission has them. We're happy to respond to questions or concerns from the council.
What we'll do first is we'll take questions for you and from the commission. And you'll be able to take a seat. We'll allow for the public to come up and make comments. And then after they have all made their comments and asked their questions, you'll come back and respond to their questions. Fair enough? Fair enough. So the name of the planning commissioners have any questions?
I guess I have one, this might be the architect, what are your floor heights?
Floor height,
Yeah, are they
they,
segments?
I think they're 12 feet, I believe. Well, floor to floor, 12 feet. Yeah, so ceilings are 9. Yep.
Oh, that's what.
Yeah, sorry,
Okay,
sorry.
Yeah, that's a massive building, that's not.
Yeah.
All right,
No,
okay,
9 feet, yep.
Nice.
Sure, your question on that there.
I know.
Anyone else?
What is the plan for the residents if they need more than the 1.5 space, like for a unique event?
So are you talking about if you had guests come on?
Yep.
So, I mean, can speak to the current parking lot for existing 48 units is not maximum occupied. So the 1.5 talks about the new development. We think there already exists excess parking on the adjacent property. And so that's why we were comfortable with 1.5 being, standard. I will tell you that every community, your community standards are your community standards, but 1.5 and 1.6 in a development that has a significant number of studios or one bedrooms is more normal. I was in Brownsburg last night with a project that had 75% one bedroom and studios, and they have 1.6 as their parking. So 1.5 to 1.6 is pretty standard when you have a large number of one bedroom.
Can you bring up the ratio of the apartments? Because I thought the one bedroom was the smaller number of all of the apartments, which I'm going to ask other members to speak first, but.
Yeah, it is. It's about the smallest, but it's 20% of them. And so I think that is something that we think leads to that number being appropriate. Two, and frankly, as the site plan shows, we have 146 staff indicated that they believe that was potentially overparked. And so we're comfortable that 1.5 will be sufficient.
Okay.
Given that there's excess on the adjacent property.
I read them incorrectly, so that's my error. Okay. Did you have anything?
Yeah, and we're talking, if you go ahead and if we run Main Street between these two buildings, it's gonna stay the current width that it is, correct? Because I mean, the only thing is, based on the pictures that you showed up there, of those two buildings facing each other, that looks like it'd be a pretty dark space between those buildings.
It would be, the road would be constructed to town standards. So
Yeah, the road, to that point, they were showing, I think, 50 feet of right of way, 28 feet back, curb to back curb, which appeared to match what was in Timber Ridge North. So it's a little bit wider than Main Street directly to the south.
it also has sidewalks there, which you can see that on the site. Sidewalks adjacent to the street, so there is significant right of way.
And you're gonna run lighting down those two?
I'm trying to answer site design questions.
Right, so hello, Joyce Skidmore with Signal Source Real Estate Services. As Russell mentioned, I'm the project lead, so managing the design team on this. If it is a town standard that we run lighting down the street, we would. drawings. We will have building lighting, so that may prove that the photometrics would support, and light to that street. So if the building lighting is sufficient, we would leave it at that, or if the town standards require building lighting, full light through it.
No, sir.
Good.
When you're going to manage the property once it's built?
Yeah, and just very specifically speaking, we have a third party manager managing all our properties, but yes, they'd be managed together as well. And that's why we chose the unit mix that we did to supplement, because Ridgeview right now is all 2-1s. And so we wanted to kind of build different unit mixes.
I'm gonna go back to the main level, the ground level. And you're saying all of the ground level will be for amenities?
No, and I apologize, didn't answer that question when I started.
Okay, sorry.
Through discussions, there's been questions about would we ever consider having commercial on the first floor? Consider yes. Is there plans for it now? No, there is not plans to have commercial there. The plans, there would be communities like residence space, amenity space, the leasing office would be located there, but there would be first floor units.
So yeah, the first floor is all units except for the current amenity space and an office. Other than that,
And would they have to go back to, if they chose to use any of that ground floor and put a commercial, say a Starbucks, and I'm just throwing it out there, would they have to go back and get a special exception for that, or would?
For that use, no. For some commercial uses, they may need a special exception. But for really any of your run-of-the-mill retail service facilities, no.
I'm just wondering about the desire for commercial, that is
Well,
on
I think
Main
that,
Street.
that's the other question too, is what's the desire and what's the market? And it's kind of, it's soft at best, I would say. I think there could be an opportunity to make a small coffee shop that lives in Timber Ridge. I think there'd be available up there. But at the same time, I think the community felt really strongly that that coupled with the market realities.
So if there's no other questions, I've got a few. Everybody good? Do you retain ownership? So you're not fixing up yourself.
so I guess retain ownership.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then we just answered the first floor commercial question. And then I don't know if you want to answer this or you want to answer this, but something that struck me earlier is that we don't want too many parking places. Is that what I heard? Or, I mean, I struggle with that comment that you can have too many parking places. That there's room for more, but we're limiting. What you're.
Yeah, I think the developer would have no issues providing more parking. But I think from a staff perspective is, and this is, you'll find this with planners, a lot of other communities who are trying to just limit the amount of excessive asphalt and impervious surface. So, and just, my experience of doing this for almost 20 years in a number of different communities is most places tend to be overparked anyway. And I think even really the Ridgeview example is a good one as to what was proposed in the 90s, 2000s. You go out there today and there's still plenty of parking space. So lastly, I would say the other thought process too was if we could reduce some of the overflow spaces, especially maybe near the single family residential to the north and to the south, then they might have put some more landscaping in to act as a better buffer rather than having that asphalt. So, and potential
Okay. And I think you made the comment, what's the height of Ridgeview now? Should have known there was a test.
I don't know that off the top of my head.
How many floors is the current?
Two stories. excessively tall, but,
No, it's decently tall.
okay.
It's got those stairwell kind of parapets that run up a little bit higher. And that probably goes to the ridge line as well. So
Okay. So that's dry retail. Okay, so that's pretty much all of our questions. Any other new ones? I'd like you to take a seat and sit tight, pay attention to the questions that are coming up from the community. So at this point, I'll open it up for public comment. And your comments can be positive or negative. I would just ask you to approach the mic, state your name and address, and be professional in your discussion and asking questions. Everyone will hopefully get their turn. They'll ask the questions, they'll make notes, and then they will come back up and respond to all your questions. You won't get an immediate answer. They're going to answer all the questions at once. Then if there's discussion after that, we could certainly have some more discussion. All right.
So you want us to marry our questions with our comments?
Yes, ma'am. And you're first.
I don't want to talk yet. I just want a different picture
Yeah, Adam, would you change it to the, not that
of
one,
a single family.
the, got a star in the middle of that one?
There you go.
And
There was this one that actually came back, gives you a little better. Yeah, there you go.
That's a good one.
yeah,
Yeah, so we can see what's going on there.
My name is Hanson. My first name is Linda Marie. Hanson is Hanson. I live at Maine in Michigan. I have this is a dead end sign to a road that will no longer be a dead end. I like the apartments. I don't have any problem with that. Could I start with my questions? And between the lawyer and Hudson, you guys figure out who's going to answer, okay? Where did he go?
They're in back.
Just that help clarity. What's the current price point? The rent range in Ridgeview, current Ridgeview?
They'll answer your questions. They'll come up and respond after everybody.
Okay, 200 to 700, whatever, that's what I want to know. What will the future price point be on the new build? The two new builds? And you guys really have not addressed the width of Main Street. The width of Main Street, I'm at 101 West. My next door neighbor is 101 East, because gosh, Fortville's so large, we ran out of numbers. I've never understood it, but our width is narrower than anybody else north of us on Main Street, on existing South Main Street. I don't know what to call it. Dead end Main Street. Everybody from 101 all the way back to the actual dead end barriers has no curb, irregular sidewalk or no sidewalk, and irregular street widths. So I think it needs to be defined for us. I would hate to think you would purchase some of my yard that I've been watering all these years, but if that's what has to be, that's what has to be. So I'd like to know, what does the city even think of the width? And I looked up stuff. I used what I could find on Fortville's website, the Fortville Comprehensive Plan of 2014, which doesn't address this piece of property at all. It focuses on Madison and Broadway. So I couldn't find anything specific to this property, but I did find a lot of good information. I'm presuming that right now, our piece of Main Street is designated as a local street, given all these different names and definitions that I found, not a collector, not an arterial, but a local. And 8-foot wide lanes are acceptable for that. you're about to turn all of Main Street into the Indy 500. I've got north of me on that little piece of Main, less than a dozen neighbors. And there are at least 25 cars and motorcycles. And they already are in the Indy 500 daily. Now you add, I don't care what you guys think about national statistics and 1.5 cars, a 1-bedroom will hold a baby and 2 parents, 2 cars, possibly 3 cars, because daddy likes to have his truck. It just happens. You look on our portion of single family residences and people have more than 2 cars. There's a crippled guy at the end of the street. I hope he's not in here because I don't want to insult him. But he doesn't drive anything, but he gets around somehow. So everybody's got at least 2 cars. So I think you're unrealistic on the number of parking spaces. They're all, you put 80 families, you're going to have potentially a minimum of 160 adults, 240 kids. You're going to have 500 people in there. So when those 18 to 20, 18-year-olds graduate from high school and have their little open house, they're going to park in my driveway. They're going to come and park next to my house, which will probably be illegal by then because of the width of the street. They're going to park out on Michigan. They're going to park all over. I'm sorry, I don't remember the name of that north neighborhood, but they're going to be all over y'all's neighborhood. And I think we're all going to hate that. So go ahead and build them 10 extra spots. What's wrong with that? Please. Otherwise, they're going to park in my spot. I own 2 vehicles, one of which is Mama's got to have her big ass truck. So it parks on Main Street because it won't fit in my driveway along with my gigantic SUV. Okay. But you're about to turn all of Main Street into either a secondary arterial or primary arterial, both of which stipulate in the town comprehensive plan, no parking allowed. That's going to be a major consequence to a lot of people on the street. I need that Main Street parking, and so do others. And there's a minimum requirement of an 11-foot lane each way. 11-foot lanes change from 8 foot. Those 6 feet, where are they going to come from? Out of my bathroom? We have skinny yards to deal with. Somebody needs to actually walk over there and take a good look. Other questions? So your planned width of Main Street, and that really might be a town plan for spillover parking. I already said that. You can defend your 1.5 parking spaces all you want with examples from other cities. I don't care. In Fortville, everybody's got 2.5 cars. So give them more than 1.5 parking spaces. Oh, Timber Ridge, I wrote it down. Are you going to fix the rest of Main Street? That might be a shared responsibility between the town and the developers, but we don't have curbs. We don't have regular sidewalks. Some of the houses have busted up sidewalks. So we need some consistency to align with whatever the plan is for the road once it gets to the apartments. Let me just take a quick look. Oh, traffic calming. Somebody mentioned that in the very beginning. Suitable traffic calming for me, for that section of Main Street to blend well with my section of Main Street is a berm about every 4 feet, please. Or a dip, or at least rumble strips right in the middle of the road. And if you can't do any of those, put in those spikes. I'm serious. It's going to be the Indy 500 in no time at all. So I have a proposal, and I wanted this picture.
I'm going to have to ask you to cut it short here because you've been
Okay.
on for 7 minutes now.
Aren't I good? I'm delighted to know that this guy owns this stuff. So he wants to get rid of it and make some money. And I don't see how any of this is going to help the town, but it's going to make some neighbors miserable. and it's gonna help him. You make some place here where you make a bridge, divide that dry riverbed, whatever you're calling it, and make a road that comes across here and connects with Southeast Parkway or North Mill. Otherwise, you will encumber the town of Fortville to come down here. Where's my roof? Well, wherever it is. It's not on here. You're going to encumber Fortville with the agony of listening to people, especially me, bitch forever, daily, about lack of a four-way traffic signal light. Because you're going to have 140, 240 cars waiting right next to my bedroom window to get into Michigan Street traffic. And in the mornings, it's a lot of traffic. So you'll need to help with traffic flow. You will create a traffic flow problem. You can get rid of at least 1/3 of these people. They'll probably drive this way to connect with 13 and go elsewhere. Fine. I feel sorry for you guys having all those cars on your streets, but it's going to happen. And 1/3 will still come down here because they actually work at Fox Garden or something. But you can get 1/3 of them to go over here because that's where they want to be. So why should they come down here, come across, and then go there? So I really think that needs serious, serious consideration. And if you have to lop off part of his bathroom, fine.
That's right.
All right, Ms. Anderson, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Who's next? Yes, sir.
Go. Okay. Can I say a couple things over? My name is,
I need to approach the microphone.
Oh, sure.
Yes. State your name and
I'm Bill Lambert. This is my wife Sherry Lambert. We own a house at 706 North Main.
Okay, thank you.
If I can approach the.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So this is us right here.
First house.
First house, very first house right here.
I'm sorry.
And we are adjacent to the project. Our house here is 27 feet off this property line. There's a 20-foot drainage easement, which keeps us from building anything at all further. I presume there's a 20-foot drainage easement here, which would go away via the PUD. But they're talking about parking 10 feet off this property line. So I can't build within 20, but they can build within 10. And then imagine my surprise. This is a big single family development here. I mean, we have this one aberration of these apartments here that were grandfathered. It's grandfathered zoning. But to do the same thing again, these are all houses. When we bought this place, we were thinking this was all single family homes, and I mean, we saw this, but we didn't think it would be duplicated. So it's somewhat of a shock to us to see what's happening, to think that within 10 feet of our property line, there'll be parking, there'll be 50-foot tall buildings looking down on our single-story structure. And I would think a lot of the neighbors similarly situated would feel the same way. When we talk about this comprehensive plan and whether or not things are consistent with that comprehensive plan, it may say something about multifamily and this is residential and not differentiate. But I'm sure we can't imply in that comprehensive plan that in every residential neighborhood, we're going to plop a 80-unit development in every residential neighborhood. And then that's consistent with the comprehensive plan. I mean, this is sort of blowing out the zoning here and just, putting commercial and multifamily where nobody ever expected that before.
And also, when we look at those 5 criteria, is it consistent with the current conditions and character of the structures around? Well, we're really talking about 3.5 acres, aren't we? I mean, there's going to be a street. So we're talking about 80 units on 3.5 acres or maybe even 3 acres. Those other apartments, the Ridgeview apartments, that's pretty close to 4 acres. And that's got 48 units on it. We're talking about putting 80 on less acreage. That just seems like too much density on 3 to 3.5 acres to me. And they'll just talk about 4 acres. That's not 4 acres because there's going to be Main Street going down the middle of it. It's 4 acres before you take away for Main Street. So I don't think it's even. I just don't think it's consistent with the current conditions, character of the structures around. Yeah, we got those apartments, but that was a grandfathered zoning. That's not what was intended in that neighborhood when Timber Ridge was built, or everything else was, or where the comprehensive plan came out. We're not going to go to every residential neighborhood, plop in 80 units, multifamily. Whether or not this is consistent as the most desirable use of the land, I mean, it's great that we're extending Main Street through there. That's terrific. But desirable to who? It's desirable for this development if you wanted to put 80 units in, but it's not particularly desirable to all the residents around there. And as far as the long-term, look at Fortville, I mean, if residents can't rely on the zoning when they buy a house, because they might plop in a big 80-unit multifamily in the middle of the residential development. I mean, that's not a great thing for the city. Then it's supposed to be consistent with the conservation of property values. Well, certainly my property is not going to be positively affected. I've talked to a couple realtors today, both of whom told me your property is going to be adversely affected. It'll become less desirable. There'll be less buyers for that particular property with a parking lot 10 feet off the property line and a lighted parking lot with 50-foot buildings looking down on your roof. So if I understand it, when we look at these 5 criteria, how do we even meet that one? I mean, has anybody done any kind of analysis, like appraisals or anything? I know the developer hasn't, or at least he told me he hadn't today. I don't think the city has. So absolutely the only evidence is my brief conversations with a couple of realtors telling me that my property values are going to go down. And so I presume that would apply to people similarly situated to me too. So where are we? I mean, I think Sherry and I, as the project is currently constituted, we're sort of a resounding no to the whole thing. But if it was going to go forward, there's just a lot more information that seems to be needed. It ought to be scaled back, I think. A big concern of ours is traffic. What is now sort of a dead end for us, not a lot of cars going by. In that house, my son lives there with his 3 grandchildren, our 3 grandchildren. This traffic thing, I don't understand how we have any information on that. Is there a traffic study that has been done? Maybe there has been. I'm sure a traffic study's been done. But I would be most interested in seeing that. How it's going to affect Timber Ridge, how it's going to affect your street, how it's going to affect kids that play nearby, how things are going to happen as that people cut over to Route 13. I mean, all of that has to be considered. And I wonder if all of this needs to have some sort of traffic study, but maybe it's already been done. I don't know. But your concerns are my concerns.
Yeah.
So, obviously,
I'm very concerned about 10 foot off my property line, have parking with big lights up there. I don't think that's enough buffer for me. I've got a 20-foot buffer that I'm giving him, and he's giving me a 10-foot buffer. So I don't think that's quite enough. So I think if we reduce the density and reduce the number of parking spaces, that's what I would like to see if the project is going to go forward. So I wish somebody had called me. I wish somebody had knocked on my door. I would have been glad to be talking about this 30 days ago instead of, at a zoning hearing. This is not where I want it to be. And those are my comments.
Thank you, Mr. Lambert. I appreciate your time.
The architect.
Oh, I forgot to mention one.
I'm Sherry Lambert, and again, owner of the house at 706 North Main. Do you have another picture that shows even the bigger area of all the single-family homes? I saw it earlier. It's a little. Yes, is everything in yellow, single-family homes? I think that was it. So now you get even a bigger picture of the area. It's all single-family homes. And the aberration is the current Ridgeview. But I want to say the picture that was up here about the current Ridgeview is not, to me, is not representative. I mean, I don't know if it's changed significantly in the past 6 months or something, but when I seen it, it was quite run down. And for this to be an extension of that is not really a good thing. So I'm kind of leery of them. Well, they're trying to say that the new apartments are consistent with the neighborhood because of this aberration. But first of all, I hope they're not consistent because that's not a good apartment building. But also they're not looking at all this single family home when they say that. So it's really, that's a no to that question on the comprehensive plan. I'm afraid that Michigan somewhere, am I looking at this? Oh, yeah. So let's say Michigan's here. This is going to be a great cut through to get to 31. Instead of having to go all the way down and up, people are going to be able to cut through over down Delaware. So that's going to be even more of the issue you were talking about. The urban feel that was mentioned right here. I mean, that's great. I think that's updated and it in certain areas of Fortville, I think it will be nice. But this is like historic homes all on this side. And then this is kind of more the suburban homes, but none of this is like urban feel. So this is going to be like a sore thumb with that urban design. I mean, these are nice, quiet Fortville neighborhoods. So I didn't really get the urban. The commercial on the first floor is very daunting. There are children, I mean, we're over here, so I can only speak for there, but there are families and children. I mean, we have grandchildren, and to think that, public is right there where they're playing, it's a little scary. It's commercial. This is not commercial. They want to make this part commercial, but no. Oh, I was just running numbers on the parking. So you have 80 units. If there's, Linda, is that it, Linda? Yeah. You were saying 2.5 cars a person in Fortville. That would be 240 spaces needed. Yeah. So my kids' bedrooms are going to be looking over, 240 cars. And they've got the lights shining in their bedroom windows. I think that apartments probably are needed in Fortville. That's not an issue, but I think there's a lot of land around that they could be put somewhere else that's more appropriate. Also, a couple of years ago, I had a phone call with this, I think it was somebody on zoning, who said that they wanted to extend Main Street and the vision that Fortville has with it. These would be single-family homes that would line the street. And that, I think, would sell in a heartbeat. Brand new homes, you know, in character with the neighborhood. If I understand you don't have a developer waiting to do that, but that would be more appropriate for the neighborhood and extend Main Street for ambulance safety and all that. So, you know, that I wasn't upset about when I talked to someone a couple of years ago, but then this was a whole other idea to extend. So that's about all I have to say.
Okay, thank you very much,
Mhm.
Mrs. Lambert. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Can you bring back the original aerial view that showed the there? My name is Tom Gooding. I live on West Carolina Street, and see this guy who takes fabulous care of that property about once a week as he drives his big lawn tractor back and forth. And I live at 106 West Carolina, which is right in the northwest corner and next to the Lambert's property. I live right up here, and I've lived there about 6.5 years and have watched the traffic in and around that area, which so many have already spoken about. And I gotta believe if you extend Main Street through those 80 units, there's gonna be considerable amount of traffic, not only going through there, but going through there very rapidly. Now, that's just my opinion based upon what I know from driving in and around and getting out of Timber Ridge for the last 6.5 years. But so much has already been said about that. I won't waste everyone's time regarding that issue again. One of the things that really concerns me selfishly is the setbacks, which was approximately 10 feet off my property, which means there's going to be 6, 8, 10, 12 cars pulling in at 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night, and their high beams are going to be hitting my house, my bedroom, my living room, and they'll be popping their horns, and maybe they'll be changing oil and tuning up their cars. I don't know what they're going to be doing. I don't have a big ass truck. I just have one car.
You can borrow mine.
I gotta believe that the need for parking is going to be substantial, whether or not they're going to be adequately parked with 120 spaces. I don't know. I don't know much about the existing Ridgeview apartments. I've only driven back there once, maybe 5 years ago. It seemed to me like they had an awful lot of cars back there, but my concern also is what impact that will have on my living style at 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock every evening, when all kinds of lights are shining into my back of my home. Additionally, the detention pond, which I understand will be running north-south on the west side of that 4 acres, will not be holding water like a pond, but on the other hand, it will be accumulating water when there's a lot of rain or thunderstorms or whatever. Then you have the question, maybe this is typical for development. What happens to the management of all those insects and bugs when that thing fills, it dumps out, it fills, it dumps out? There's just a lot of concerns I have. Most of them are the impact it's going to have on property values of roughly 4 to 6 homes on the extreme north end of that property. Maybe there's a way in redesigning the parking where you can get the cars 40 feet, 50 feet back from our property lines. But I'll leave that up to this young lady who's managing the architectural and construction teams. Just as a question, maybe just quickly, this gentleman, has he sold the older Ridgeview apartments to this other group?
Hudson Group has purchased the apartments, the current apartments.
The current apartments? Yes, I've sold the apartments. Just question of business. Yes, I have.
But not the land.
And the land is under contract. Yeah, they have not purchased that land. It's.
The land is under contract with Hudson for this gentleman.
Yes, sir. That's my understanding. But we'll get that question answered when they come up for sure.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Mr. Gooding, thank you. Yes, sir.
My name is Nick Sarter. I live at 109 West Carolina Street, just across the street from Tom and around the corner from the Lamberts. I have a lot of the same concerns that everybody else here does. So I'll save you from that. Some things I do think, I really do believe that Fortville does need multifamily housing. I don't disagree that that is a need everywhere. I just don't feel that this is necessarily the right way to do it. I do think 3 stories is too tall for what is, as the Lamberts have said, surrounded by nothing taller than 2 stories. It's all single family residential housing. I think that a 3-story urban style development does not fit what Fortville really is. Fortville, we're a small town. Obviously, we're growing. We're going to continue to grow. I don't want to prevent that. That's good for the town. It's good for the businesses in the town. We have some awesome restaurants here, but I definitely don't feel that the 3-story urban development it fits us. I think a 2-story development of, that would not only limit the height and limit the eyesore in backyards, and in my front yard for that matter, if I'm completely honest, but would also help limit the number of people that would potentially be speeding down that main street if it does go through. Personally, I think that if it were to move forward, especially if it's a 2-story, then it could be limited, the entrance could be limited to the current Ridgeview. And that way we could eliminate the potential cars speeding through there. I think it would help the traffic a lot. And then we'd only have to mitigate the residents that are on School Street with the additional traffic instead of, tons of residents elsewhere. That would limit the in and out. We'd still probably need a light. I don't like that, but sometimes that's life. If it were to go through, all the way through on Main Street, sidewalks and the street widths, I think that is a very valid question. For the 4 years that I've lived in Fortville, would have loved sidewalks to go walk all the way down Main Street from my house instead of having to walk all the way around. That would be awesome. But I think that if we have that development, it does go all the way through, that sidewalks need to be able to match the foot traffic of all of those added residents. And from what we've heard so far, I don't know that there is a plan for that. Maybe there is. Hopefully, they can speak to that. I think Mr. Lambert brought up a great point about a traffic study. Do we know what actual impact based on actual data that this development would have? And then property values. If it's a 3-story development, that's going to be a lot of people. That's going to be, 50 feet, that's tall. That's an eyesore. Even from, my house, which admittedly, all things considered is not close, especially when considered to Tom and the Lamberts. But I really would struggle to see where somebody would come and potentially, purchase my home and not see this 50-foot building right there and back out of it. All things considered, if everything else was the same. Those are my concerns, my questions. That's it. Thank you.
Ask you, what was your name again, please?
Nick Sarter,
Nick.
S-A-R-T-O-R. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Anyone else? Yes, sir. You will be our last public comment. We've run 30 minutes on this.
I am Bob Spinner. I live at 519 North Merrill Street. I just want to mention 2 things. Number one, when I bought all that in 2014, that was all commercial. Adam probably remembers it. I jumped through hoops to get it changed. So at one time, that was all commercial there. The second thing is I own Ridgeview, 7 years, 48 units in there, 96 parking spots. Never did could you not drive through there and see at least 20 or 25 empty? So that 1.5 parking spots per apartment is very adequate, which is 7 years of owning Ridgeview, I can testify to.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. So at this time, I'll open it up for any public officials who wish to make any comments or ask questions. Seeing none, we'll go back to Adam and the developer to respond to the public comments and questions.
Can I ask something else? Did you guys talk to the school system?
We'll add that to your questions.
Okay, because you're impacting the school.
Right.
Classrooms needed and bus routes.
Yeah. So I don't know who wants to come up to respond to these questions, architects or attorneys, whoever. Some of them Adam will probably have to respond to as well. Do you want to go first, Adam?
I'll just go for
All right. You're up.
Because I said he talks, he answers all my questions. for me, I'm gonna continue to do that.
Steal the
Let
thunder.
him make his money.
I'll walk through a handful of these and then Ken can answer maybe there's a handful that's appropriate coming from him. So I'll just start by saying, what right of way exists currently, south of the project, south of the proposal, north of the proposal, that's outside of the control of the developer. The developer site plan provides and would show that sidewalks would be constructed along the right of way to start to build that bridge of sidewalks. Oftentimes it's sidewalks to nowhere, but if you don't ever start with sidewalks, you never get sidewalks. So this would be, the length of this property would have sidewalks constructed on both sides of the street. The questions about parking and no parking, I know there's concern about once this maybe has increased volume with parking and no parking be something that's automatically triggered. We have town council members here, they know that that's something that they control as its four-way stops. Those are all things that I think can and will be considered when Main Street is extended. Do I anticipate Main Street be extended at some point, whether this development moves forward or not? I think the answer to that question is yes. There is, it makes sense to complete your traffic infrastructure in your community. This is a grid layout. This is the piece of the grid that's missing. Is this Fortville, east side or do I think that this, I drive through Fortville when I'm going to Anderson or I'm going to Fort Wayne, I come to eat here. Do I think that you will have a bunch of people who are not Fortville residents who are going to utilize this as a cut through? I do not think. I think that this is a local street. It will be utilized as local streets are to be utilized. And will be utilized. As it relates to what traffic calming measures, I think we're open for discussions on what traffic calming measures look like. I've heard several times that this is an aberration and because it's grandfathered, that should decrease your consideration of whether this is appropriate development adjacent to this multifamily. A quick look of property tax records were that I believe the existing Ridgeview was built approximately 1992, 1993. Many of those homes that are to the north were built in 1995, 1996, or times beyond that. So not only do I believe that you shouldn't discount it because there's an aberration that existed there when that single family to the north. So law school, you learn about coming to a nuisance. You can't come and live next to the big farm and say you don't want to live next to the big farm. If you bought a home next to an existing multifamily development, I think call it an aberration and say you always thought it was going to be single family everywhere else. It's not particularly something I think that holds water. There's conversation about, are you going to do this in every neighborhood in town? Well, not every neighborhood has a multifamily development next door. Not everything has 4 acres that's available for a building home. to assemble 4 acres, many other places in town would be buying out a large number of units. And I don't think that you're setting some sort of precedent. I don't think you're doing anything untoward or unusual. This is how infill development will go. We talked a lot about the impact and how close this is going to be specifically to the neighbors to the north. And just for a matter of perspective, so you have building setback line of 50 feet. That's the closest that the building could be located. The 2-story carries on for approximately 30 feet on the west building, on the north side, and approximately 70 feet from the south side. And those buildings are then flipped. So on the east building, you have about 70 feet, 75 feet. So you have 50 feet plus 75 feet. So your setback, in some of those, you're set back at least 75 feet, maybe as much as 125 feet before you get to the 3-story. We do have in the ordinance have a 50-foot maximum height. The building as designed and as shown is 45 feet to its current ridge line. We added that extra because it needs a screen rooftop mechanicals. So to the extent we needed any additional height to screen those rooftop mechanicals, that's why you have a 50-foot maximum height. Not that you're going to go to 50 foot. The current design doesn't contemplate going to 50 feet. That's 10% change, but it is the intent of the developer. It's what's before you this evening, which is part of the ordinance. As it relates to the value of adjacent properties, with all due respect to my friends who hold realtor licenses, they are not appraisers. Their job is to find a willing seller and a willing buyer. And willing sellers and willing buyers come in all shapes and sizes. So I live in Fort Bend. My neighbor's house is closer to me than you are, Mr. Chairman. I willingly bought a home that has 7 feet between me and my neighbor. That's what I want. There are a variety of builders, of willing buyers, willing sellers. The opinion of one realtor or some realtors does not jive with what I think national studies show, which is that new construction, new multifamily construction has no impact on properties adjacent to them. And in some situations, in some communities, it actually increases the value. You have a high quality development that goes in, you know it's going to be managed, contained, you know what it's going to look like, and that does provide some or some certainty to potential buyers. So further national studies, I have a study that I look at a lot from Harvard in the 2000s. There are communities, Richmond, Virginia has a similar study that talks about not just Richmond, but the surrounding areas around Richmond as well. So I think there are national data that would refute the opinion of some of those. Talk about what the impact on schools are traditionally in multifamily. It's traditionally less per unit than single family new construction. That's a national number. Traditionally has less units, or less children per 100 units than family does. Ken, I will add one question I know is current rents and expected rents.
Sure. So current rents at Ridgeview range between 750 and 1050.
Sorry.
$750 to $1,050.
Does that include utilities?
That does not include utilities. The future projected rents, they have to consider these would be for 2025, right? So this is 3 years from now. Would be for a 1-bedroom, 1,100, a 2-bedroom, 2-bath, 1,500, 2 bath, 3 years just context, rents in Annapolis and surrounding area are growing at 12 to 15%. So that would actually be below the of rents in the area.
Okay, before you start, if I can ask, and then maybe you're going to answer that.
The new project, by the way, or
I'm sorry,
the existing work, those three numbers that you just gave for 2025?
for the new project in 2025. That's what we.
Okay, so the one question that was posed is the current rate for Ridgeview and the new rate for the remodel.
So current Ridgeview is from 750 to 1050.
And then after remodeling, I thought the
The
rent.
1050 would be after remodel.
Okay,
For
right.
somebody that moved in last month to a brand new unit.
Okay. That's right, because all those are the same size.
They're all this.
I was thinking more range, so that was, once again, my fault. So to Mr. Lambert's point, is it correct? He has a 20-foot setback. Is the parking going to be within 10 feet of that 20-foot setback?
That's what's shown currently, yes.
Okay. All right. Adam, you had some things to.
Yeah, real quick, what I just wanted to address was the width of Main Street, lack of curb, the sidewalk, the condition. Those points, like many others, are all very well taken. And we have discussed that internally. To the extent that those improvements could be wrapped into this project, financed as part of this project, that's something that we could look into. I don't know offhand what the current width of the road is over there. It is narrower, no doubt, than up in Timber Ridge. But to be clear, I think as staff, to the extent that it can be funded, we would love to do that. It's just a matter of, is there money to do that? And I can't answer that question right now. And lastly, the only other thing that based on what the developer had to say, that I would urge you to think about, which were good elements of the project that could be mentioned as a condition of some sort. It could be hardy board siding, to put that on Ridgeview, to the extent that they continue to own that project. I think could potentially be a good condition to the extent that can be done. Traffic calming measures like a bump out or a crosswalk. I think those concerns are understandable. Speeding traffic, and certainly that seems like a reasonable request. And then in terms of the street lights, that's another reasonable request in my view. Is I think for a new subdivision, so family subdivision, they have to put them in entrances, intersections, and then usually mid-block. I want to say it was 300 feet or 600 feet. I'm sorry, I can't remember which one it is, but and I have to see if that is required or not in this scenario. But those three things: hardy board, traffic calming, and street lights, I think we want some further discussion of the project.
And then lastly, the question was the dry run. Wet, dry, wet, dry, wet, dry, a lot of mosquitoes. That would tend to make me mad. How do you guys plan on controlling that?
So that is a typical, it's a standard design throughout all of Indiana for dry detention. So pretty much any property management company is aware of how you have to handle that, how you have to maintain it, how you have to keep it mowed, so you can from living there. Probably be in, I would assume, in a standard O&M manual as well for county soil and erosion standards. Typically, developers are required to do an manual that would be addressed in our.
Any new questions?
one thing with, so we're running sidewalk up and down, or excuse me, curving up and down Main Street. So presumably there'll be inlets and the trunk line, is that gonna tie in to the north? I mean, that infrastructure being installed with this, if we're doing Main Street's being installed, that infrastructure should probably go in, is that?
Right, yes, presumably an underground storm line.
It would go to the north, because to the south, they don't have inlets, we're missing that trunk.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, so that would go in with anything to the south was good. Okay.
Well, we would have to look at that more carefully during the construction plan review on where so they're gonna have to have an outlet anyway from the detention basin.
Right.
And as for the stormwater, underground stormwater, presumably, and again, we have to investigate that in more detail later, but presumably the stormwater could be connected to the stormwater system that's to the north.
Okay.
As long as there's
Any other questions, comments? So, thank you for everyone for attending tonight. Just to explain the process here, our job is to send a positive or negative or no recommendation to the council. I've been on the planning commission, the RDC for a few years now, and I've seen this process at its best and worst. So I commend all of you for coming forward and speaking your mind. And Linda, I really appreciate you having 2 beers.
You can borrow the stuff. I'm sorry, it's not red.
Well, now I'm not interested. So what I would encourage is you look at the size of this project and the community around it. We had 4 community members speak out in some remonstrance against this project. And we have had other projects in this community that were not very well met. And I will tell you that volume speaks volumes, and that you need to get your neighbors in here with the council if you really want to fight this project. I have my own opinion, and I agree with some of the things everyone has said. If it were in my backyard, I would have the exact same comments. I don't know that that's enough to stop a project, or if there's just a happy medium that has to be obtained. But if you have these feelings and you really want to push against this project, I would encourage you to talk to your neighbors and talk to your council members. They are the final word. They have the final say in how this project happens and what goes forward from here. We make our recommendation. Whether we say positive or negative, they still are going to make their recommendation based on what community input is. So again, thank you for your time and your input. It's very, very much appreciated. Gave me some things to think about, which I'm sure other commission members have as well. Yes, ma'am.
From a learning standpoint, can I ask, what does the town get from this? Because it's not like single unit houses where you make tax money off of each house owner.
Well, I can answer some of it. I know Adam will give a much more educated answer, but more people is more revenue to our community in the
If they
businesses
shop
downtown.
in our community,
Well, if they're lazy like me, I have a golf cart, so I don't have to go outside of this community. I shop everywhere I can. And some people aren't going to be that way. Some people are. And I can speak to the schools because they just bought my house and they're going to tear it down and go to school in Westmore. At least that's the last thing I heard. So they are prepared for more influx of people because there's a lot of houses already approved and going up. You've seen them on the north side of town and the south side of town. So I think the school's pretty well prepared. In the growth of this town, I love this town. I don't ever plan on leaving it. So that's why I participate here, is because I want to have some input and say we did something valuable. But we can't make everyone happy. I agree with everything you said about your street, because I was on the police department for a while. I've been on your street, and I don't particularly like your street, just because of the width. And I think it needs a lot of improvement. I blame Adam.
Adam can tell you, it needs some traffic control.
It does, and
He had
traffic
an
control-
accident at that corner.
there at Main Street, I had not even given out a thought, Rich, you brought it up, and you are absolutely right. That's gonna be a heavy traffic area
Now-
that staff is gonna have to consider.
Something else. Does anybody ever ask the developer, well, how few could you put in and still make some money? Because obviously they've done their arithmetic, and to get the profit that they want, so they can all share it, they want 40 and 40 units.
I think
But
I don't think the question is posed as to how many do you have to make this work? I don't know that that's a valid question. I think you look at a project, the cost of it, and then back into what you need to make that work. That's how I would look at it. But I don't know what questions staff asks developers, and how they come up with their thing. Maybe that's a discussion you can have with Kent after the meeting. But I didn't mean to drag on my comments that long, and I apologize. But Adam, did you want to address anything I said?
Well, just in the interest of time, I guess I'll keep brief, is that, in terms of what's in it for the town, I would say that the assessed value, the tax collection rate would be higher in thinking about this. I think it'd be at 2% for rental as opposed to 1% for single family. Honestly, from a planning position, a land use analysis, we generally don't consider that. It's more of it's more from the standpoint of somebody wants to purchase this property on the free and open market, and being the free and open market, they want to develop it. And the most important question is, will this development have a negative impact on the people around it? There are certainly varying opinions of that, and we can respect those opinions, but that is really, it's really trying to balance private property rights with the community good. And that's always a tricky thing to do, but that's why we have these meetings to.
I'm glad you let us come.
To factor that in. So, in any event,
But to the comment I made earlier, if you look around and just a quick assessment of how many homes there are, there's less, you represent less than 10% of your neighbors. So,
Oh, I notified my immediate neighbors.
right,
All those of us who have 2-story houses, we're all in the south end.
right,
All the rest of those houses, except for the new build, are little 1-story hovels.
right. So that's what I'm getting at, is that there's unity, I mean, good numbers help in unifying
Yeah.
the community. So if that's where your community is, that small area of this community, if they all feel the same way you do, you need to get involved. That's my suggestion. But with all that in mind, again, thank you all for your time and for being present at this meeting. But at this point for this commission, your decision is I'm looking for a motion with amendments that Adam maybe made about Main Street lighting, speed control or road control, road diet, however you want to refer to it, and potentially the hardy sighting, is to make a positive, a negative, or no recommendation.
Given the properties, I know that you guys said that the apartments were existing, but like the section just north of these existing apartments, the homes were built in 1995, and on Beacon, it says these apartments were built in 1999 and 2000. So the homes were existing before the existing Ridgeview apartments went in. I believe as long as Beacon is correct on when those buildings were built. But I use the art rezoning, I think, with that. I think that there could be another multifamily, a smaller building would be more appropriate in that position.
Is that
Did we make a positive recommendation? Well, yeah, just asking. But address the height? Or should? or is
well,
that
at this
too
point, we're
muddy?
just talking about changing it from R3 to PUD, right?
yeah, unless Alex says otherwise, my opinion would be that you could, or whatever you feel is appropriate in your recommendation.
So let's give a minute for Alex to respond.
I agree with Adam. You can, make proposed you could recommend approval, subject to any changes that you may have to the PUD.
Okay. We can still have some discussion if there needs to be, but at this point, we are looking for a motion. With or without amendment.
So this, we're just making a motion for the town council to make the final decision at this point.
Yes,
So
we're sending our recommendation to the town council on the PUD.
on the PUD. So I will go ahead and say that we do a positive recommendation to the town council and for them to take into consideration building height, additional crosswalks, street lights, and the addition of fiber cement siding to the adjacent building. Case number 02-R7-.
I'll second that motion. Can we open up for discussion?
Yes, that is open.
Can we, and Alex, if we need to make restate it, I would like the traffic calming to be more vague, but that maybe that the staff and the staff engineering team. If we could bump out, if they could do some parallel parking along the street, there's a bunch of stuff we could do to really control speeds. I know that's a big concern for there. Widths, I think with the setbacks, there's a lot that can be done, and the engineering team you guys to work with. So, good job. Main Street right now. So,
Did your motion include Main Street light?
It did.
Okay.
And that's just for the town council to take all that into consideration.
Sure. You're saying a positive recommendation with in consideration of fiber cement,
Yes. In the adjacent
the
building.
building height, road control to some degree. Yeah, sure. We all agree that we don't want that to become a speedway. And then Main Street lighting.
Yes.
would we add conditions? Are they, because it seems like a lot of times they are requirements, but this is more, we're talking consideration. So should we be more prescriptive in, like, if we want to require the traffic calming versus a consideration? Specify.
Yes.
Okay.
The proposed ordinance that you send to the council with your recommendation shouldn't have additional considerations for them to add and subtract. They can send it back to you with their proposed changes, but these are things, this is your opportunity to basically finalize the PUD ordinance based on the information that you've received and considered as to what you think would be appropriate to be adopted by the town council. So I think what you send should be in the form that the plan commission views would be appropriate to approve. And then the council can look at what you've added in there, and if they disagree, they can send it back with modifications and so forth. But be more prescriptive.
So it needs to be in a form where it's not down to the council, they're not making a determination during that meeting.
So we need to be more specific on what we want to require versus what we're saying we need to take a closer look at.
Yeah.
So,
well, alternatively, what we've done in the past, Alex, so you think about this, is for these 4 issues that they talked about is we've had developers, when we have this language, I'll work with the developer on the spirit of what you're getting after and come up with, 4 different conditions on that. Take that to, if you're comfortable with that.
so in your motion, which we will have to restate, you will have to restate. Do you feel how strongly do you feel about these? Do you want to leave these up to the discretion of staff and?
So my thought process is on it, we've had, since I've been on this council here, we've had several multi-family projects come our way, and this is the first time I've ever seen any kind of project since I've been here that's pretty much so checked every box, and then went above and beyond. So there are issues here, which, I agree with many of the people, their concerns, and, I feel the concerns, and I live close to where this is gonna be, and it's gonna directly impact me as well. But I feel like, from our position of where we sit, all those boxes have been checked. And I feel like making those suggestions is something that I would entrust to the members that be on our, such as Adam and other people that are affiliated, they're going to be affiliated with this project throughout completion or beginning to completion, are going to make the right choices for our recommendations.
Okay. So you're free to restate your.
So again, I'm just going to
Let me
motion.
stop you with- Alex, do we have to take a vote on that initial motion since there was a second?
Yes. Yeah, unless you want to withdraw the motion.
Yes, I will withdraw.
Okay, so I'm looking for a new motion, since that one was withdrawn respectfully.
You want to go for it?
So I'll make a motion to provide a positive recommendation for case number 02 RZ 2022 Ridgeview West PUD, with the following stipulations: that that traffic calming is included along Main Street. Street lights are also included along Main Street, as well as the hardy plank siding.
For the second building.
For
Or for the existing building. The hardy plank siding is for the existing.
For the existing building, correct? Yes. And then I guess consideration for building height to go to staff.
I second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstaining? Motion carries. Okay. Any other commission comments?
Thanks.
No, ma'am, we're done with no public comment. Staff comments? I will open up for a quick public comment.
You forgot well, you may have wanted to, but the commercial use on the first floor, it seemed like maybe that was not.
I don't think it was forgotten. I don't think that's a real priority. And I didn't feel, and maybe I'm speaking for people, I shouldn't say I don't believe we felt that was a necessary address issue, because I don't think it's really in their wheelhouse that they're really looking for. But
But it doesn't need any approval. Like, they can put the coffee shop there and clothing store.
based on our recommendation at this point,
Correct. Yeah, if it were to approve.
but that can still be addressed at the council meeting.
Correct.
There you go. That's the point we missed. We're not going to go back and redo it. That is your point, to reiterate to them that we had that chance and we missed it.
It seemed there was a lot of talk about it.
Right. Any other commission comments? I'll look for a motion to adjourn at 8:30.
I'll give you the motion to adjourn. If you'll listen to Adam, none of your 4 magical points address actual traffic. I suggested cutting over to Southeast Parkway, and the young guy in the back suggested connecting to existing Ridgeview and not connecting to existing Main, and that would solve all the problems.
And that's something you can
And
bring.
you guys are adjourned.
No, we're not. I appreciate your efforts, but not quite yet. But that's another talking point, along with Ms. Lambert's, on with the council, to readdress that, since we missed it. Okay. Looking for a motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Aye.